Hello Year 7, this is Oxborough here again. We have got to week 5 of our study into war poetry. We are going to be looking at the final poem this week, which is called The Manhunt by Simon Armitage. So as always, make sure you've got the poem, make sure you've got your fact book, any other things that you need, pencil, highlighter and those sorts of things, and then we can get started. So, as always, start with a quick knowledge check task. We've gone through over the last couple of weeks loads of different terms. I've just picked out a couple that we'll need for this poem and then just a couple for revision. So we've got repetition, metaphor, semantic field and rhyme scheme. Write those 4 words down on a piece of paper, pause the video here, give yourself, let's say 4 minutes, 5 minutes, to write a definition, and because some of them are for revision, maybe you could see if you could write your own example down this time to try and really revise those techniques. Pause the video here and then come back when you've done that task. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers. So repetition, this is when a word or phrase is repeated. This is usually to emphasize a feeling or idea, can be used to create rhythm, or it can develop a sense of urgency. So I've just put an example here. The wind was cold, cold enough to chill me to the core. So using a word or phrase more than once. Metaphor, we've done several times over the last few weeks. This is where you suggest that one thing is another thing. So her fingers were icy claws is an example I've put for today. Semantic field, this is where you have a collection of words which are related to one another through their similar meanings. So I've just used that same example as before. So a poem about a ship would use words that all associate with that: ocean, waves, sea, tide, blue, so on. And the final one, rhyme scheme, we've talked about over the last few poems, but I don't think we've had it as an actual key term. A rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymes at the end of each line of a poem. It's usually referred to by using letters to indicate which lines rhyme. We've definitely looked at this and you've had a go at doing that yourselves. So, for example, I've just put here, you might have an A-B-A-B rhyme scheme, an alternate pattern, or you might have A-A-B-B-C-C, kind of rhyming couplets. There are lots of different versions of rhyme schemes that you might be able to identify. So hopefully you've got those. You might want to pause again here just to check those and make sure you've got the correct definitions written down. Okay, so moving on, reading the poem. So The Manhunt is our poem for today. Hopefully you've got that in front of you. Take a few moments to read the poem to yourself, whether you prefer to read it aloud or read it in your head, that's fine. Or if you prefer to have it read to you, there's an audio recording of it here. It's just a link to, it's actually the poet reading it aloud, Simon Armitage, on YouTube. So obviously you can't click the link on the video, but the link is in the comment section below. You should be able to find that, so you can do that now. Okay, so now we've all had a chance to read the poem and got a feel for it. I'm just going to go through and talk to you a little bit about the context, who the poet is, and those sorts of things. So Simon Armitage, he's an English poet, and he was appointed Poet Laureate last year in 2019. So this poem, The Manhunt, it's often referred to as Laura's poem. Now you might think, why has it got 2 different names? Why does people refer to it as a different thing? So it originally aired as part of a TV documentary where the poem was read by somebody called Laura, and she was the wife of a soldier called Eddie. And Eddie had been away and fought in various conflicts, and the poem explores his mental suffering after being injured in conflict, but it's from his wife's point of view, hence Laura's poem. So the poem addresses common issues that soldiers have when they return from war, such as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We've talked about this before. You might need to refer back to your notes if you need a bit more detail. So Simon Armitage actually said about this poem because he was not a soldier himself. He said, "This is as close to war as I want to get." So hopefully that sort of highlights to you the realities of war that are shown in this poem. So what is the poem actually about? The poet explores the negative effects of war on those who return. So that's what Simon Armitage does. But in the poem, the wife of the soldier, she tries to get to know her husband again after he returns injured from war. He has quite substantial injuries, and he suffered both physical and mental injuries. Through the poem, the wife appears to be exploring her husband's injuries in sort of a tentative, caring way in order to build up their relationship again and get close to him. So the soldier, he's actually been shot in the face, which is quite shocking, but clearly he has survived. And through the poem, it tracks the journey that the bullet enters him, and as it sort of ricochets and makes its way around the body, and it describes to us the effects that it has. So we are going to begin with our more detailed analysis now. Make sure you've got a pen and a highlighter, and we'll go through and you can make some notes on the poem as we have done previously. After the first phase, after passionate nights and intimate days, only then would he let me trace the frozen river which ran through his face. Only then would he let me explore the blown hinge of his lower jaw, and handle and hold the damaged porcelain collarbone, and mind and attend the fractured rudder of shoulder blade, and finger and thumb the parachute silk of his punctured lung. So we begin. This first couplet, as in the first 2 lines, it's a couplet, reflects the beginning of a more traditional love poem as it echoes the start of a relationship. It might also show us what it was like when they were reunited, if you like, after the war, when he returned home. We've got some repetition here, which was one of your key terms that we've just done a little revision of. Only then. So repetition of that phrase, only then would he let me, shows the slow and painful recovery that he is experiencing. The verb that's used here, let, creates the feeling of his reluctance to be touched. He's clearly quite closed and doesn't want to be open to his wife, and she is trying really hard to build up that relationship again and that trust between them. So through this first part here, we've got a series of metaphors of delicate objects. So we've got parachute silk, porcelain collarbone, and all of those are used to show how fragile he is mentally and physically. It could also be said that using those everyday objects could show her, Laura, her reluctance to talk about the injuries, maybe the reality of the fact that he's got a shattered collarbone or the shoulder blade or his punctured lung. Maybe it's too painful for her to talk about the reality of the damage that her husband has suffered. Maybe that is why she's using these metaphors to compare them, to make it slightly easier to talk about. We also have here a variety of language, sort of caring language, handle, hold, bind, mind, attend. There's lots in there. This shows the love that she has for her husband and her need to care for him while he's injured. So that's the first part of our analysis there. If you need to pause the video, then do so just to add your notes. If not, we will carry on. Only then could I bind the struts and climb the rungs of his broken ribs, and feel the hurt of his grazed heart. Skirting along, only then could I picture the scan, the fetus of metal beneath his chest, where the bullet had finally come to rest. Then I widened the search, traced the scarring back to its source, to a sweating, unexploded mine, buried deep in his mind, around which every nerve in his body had tightened and closed. Then, and only then, did I come close. So we've got at the start here sort of an image of his grazed heart. This could refer to sort of physically that the bullet has entered his body and physically grazed his heart, but it could also refer to the emotional damage that he suffered. His heart has been emotionally damaged. We've got semantic field throughout the poem, but it's quite evident here, a use of military language. Struts, climb, rungs, we've got skirting along. There's lots in there that you could pick out and highlight. This is interesting here, where he refers to the fetus of metal. He's actually talking about the bullet. It's clearly a foreign object in his body. It's not welcome. But that term, fetus, a fetus, if you were unsure, is an unborn baby, is the term that you would normally use. So it's quite a shocking comparison to use to describe the bullet in that way. But as you should have been able to see, the bullet has clearly, if you look back to the start of the poem where it talks about the frozen river in his face, that's where the bullet has entered his face. And then we sort of trace through his body, the collarbone, his ribs, the punctured lung, and then we come to his broken ribs and his heart. So it's sort of tracing through his body, and the poem traces that journey, if you like. Then it goes on to talk about this unexploded mine. Maybe there's something inside him. It's not a physical mine, obviously, but there's something deep inside her husband that is always going to be there now after his experience and the things that he's seen during conflict. His wife is maybe trying to diffuse her husband, like you might diffuse a bomb or a mine. Essentially, she's gently trying to work to get her old husband back, to get him back to who he was. But perhaps he will never change. As it says here, it's buried deep in his mind, and every nerve in his body has tightened and closed around it. So she's got a lot of work to do, and she feels as though once she has tried to undo these things that have happened to him and to understand, only then will she come close to having her old husband back, as the final line suggests. So that's the end of our detailed analysis. Again, if you need to pause here to add any more of those notes, then obviously you can. Final thing, what does Simon Armitage say? I thought it might be interesting for you. There's a link here to a video. It's just a short 5-minute clip. If you want to hear what Simon Armitage has to say about his poem, he goes into a bit more detail, talks about a couple of things that I've talked about as well, but he just gives you a slight more insight as to why he'd written the poem, what he got out of it, and what he was trying to show us. Again, that link will be in the comments at the bottom. Apart from that, hope you've enjoyed the last 5 weeks of poetry, studying all of these war poems. Hope you had a good go at the quiz. Obviously I'll be able to see how everybody got on with that when we get the results in. But for now, take care and hopefully see you all soon. Bye.